For those of you who have watched my channel for a very long time, or those of you who may know me in real life, particularly Commander players, will know my favourite card ever printed is surprisingly not the Pimp Fiend Vifnir, it's not a Fulminator Mage, it's not even Living End. The card I love is the Great Aurora. It is utter nonsense and complete jank. But if you are the rebellious type and you like to play your magic with a bit of anarchy and a little bit of chaos...
You came in here for a Twix, I'd stick one in your eye, one in your ear and one up your bum. But I'd have to break into another packet and I'm not prepared to do that.
Then the Great Aurora is definitely the card for you. My name is Dan.
Dan's a fantastic man. It really is.
This is MTG Tavern, and today we're playing Mono Green, the Great Aurora in Pioneer.
Hello there, and welcome.
So what is the Great Aurora other than just the greatest card ever printed? Card. The Great Aurora is a 9 CMC spell, being 3 green and 6 of any colour. It reads that each player must shuffle all cards from his or her hand and all permanents he or she owns into his or her library and then draws that many cards. Each player may then put any number of land cards from his or her hand onto the battlefield and exile the Great Aurora. Now there are two key things I want to focus on with this particular card and how we're going to use this to our advantage. The first thing being that it just says permanents. It doesn't say cards, it says permanents. So if we have a clue token, a food token, a 1/1 goblin token, those are permanents. They get shuffled into the library and they count as one extra card we draw when the spell resolves. And that is where we make the big difference. If you think about it, in this format or many other formats, most spells don't accumulate card advantage. So we think of a Fatal Push, a Negate, even just a creature usually doesn't accumulate card advantage. So our strategy and our game plan is to prepare for the Great Aurora, and almost every spell we play will accumulate an extra card or an extra token-based permanent. Meaning that when the Great Aurora does resolve, we're going to get to draw a hell of a lot more cards than our opponent. The other thing of note is that each player puts all land cards drawn this way onto the battlefield under their control. So we need to make sure our deck has plenty of lands so we don't get completely screwed by this. So let's begin our now deck tech, doing as we usually do, the lands first, because as I always say, the lands are the most boring thing. If you can get the lands out of the way, the rest of the deck tech should be interesting. We're playing 14 Forest, 4 Haship Oases, 2 Desert of the Indomitable, 2 Blast Zones, and 3 Field of Ruins. That's a total of 25 lands, which should be plenty for what we're trying to achieve. So, the Great Aurora is a 9 mana spell. How on earth are we going to get enough mana to pay for this Great Aurora? And we are going to be hardcasting it the usual way, as Richard Garfield did intend. And also, by doing this, how are we going to accumulate card advantage and get more permanents out of our library or through tokens onto the battlefield? Now we could play something like an Elvish Mystic or a Llanowar Elves to try and quickly cast the Great Aurora, but not only is that quite fragile, but also when the Great Aurora does resolve, it's just 1 Elvish Mystic for a fresh card when we shuffle it back in. Instead, we're going to play sorceries that get at least 2 lands out of our library and either put them onto the battlefield or into our hand. We'll start off in the 2-drop area with a Nissa's Triumph. We search our library for 2 basic forest cards. If we control a Nissa Planeswalker, and we do have Nissa Planeswalkers in the deck, instead we search our library for any 3 land cards. Now these can be a Blast Zone, a Field of Ruin, or one of the deserts. This means that if we go and fetch a Blast Zone, we can potentially just sacrifice that a bit later on and blow up some 1 or 2-drop permanents from our opponent, so when the Great Aurora resolves, that's even less cards they are drawing. This Pilgrimage tutors up 2 basic forests from our library and puts one of them onto the battlefield tapped and the other one into our hand. However, if there are 2 or more instants or sorceries in our graveyard, we instead get to tutor 3 lands, put 1 on the battlefield and 2 into our hand. And much like Nissa's Triumph, there's a great chance here that we're going to accrue 2 or 3 cards in our hand or on the battlefield for when we resolve the Great Aurora. We have 2 spells left that go and tutor up lands from our library, and I'm going to skip the 5-drop land searcher right now and go ahead to the 6-drop, which is a Nissa's Renewal. We go and tutor up 3 lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then we gain 7 life. And the great news is that if we cast a Nissa's Renewal, we obviously have 6 lands available. 6 plus 3 is 9. 9 is the magic number to cast the Great Aurora. Now, what about that other ramp spell I was talking about, and it's probably the best one out of the lot. It's a 3 of Hour of Promise. This card potentially gets us 4 permanents for the price of 1. We can shoot up any 2 land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Now, these can be the Blast Zones, the Field of Ruins, or you'll also remember we also have deserts in the library as well. If we have a desert on the battlefield before we cast Hour of Promise, and we then go ahead and search up 2 more deserts, not only do we get the 2 lands, we also get 2 zombie tokens. And remember, Great Aurora only counts permanents, not cards, so the zombie tokens do count towards the Great Aurora. So we're going ahead, we're ramping a crap ton in the early game, we've got the Great Aurora. What's the actual payoff though, because the Great Aurora doesn't put lethal threats onto the battlefield? Well, the best thing we can draw off of the Great Aurora is some Gaea's Revenge. It's a 8/5 with haste and it can't be countered. And also, it can't be the target of non-green spells. So for all intents and purposes, this thing has hexproof, it has haste, and it can't be countered. You'll notice that the Great Aurora puts the lands onto the battlefield, but it doesn't state that the lands have to be tapped. Meaning that when we draw all of those cards later on in the game, if we draw the Gaea's Revenges and we hit all of those land drops put onto the battlefield, the Gaea's Revenge will come down in multiples and attack our opponent with haste damage, and there is virtually nothing they can do about it. Now, there are 4 more creatures in this deck that you're going to be really wanting to hit off of a Great Aurora, or just generally later on in the game. We've got 2 World Breakers, a 7-drop that exiles a creature, an enchantment, or an artifact when it is cast. So even if our opponent counters this, the World Break is going to get a 2-for-1. Our opponent uses up a counter spell in their hand, or a removal spell when it's on the battlefield. On top of that, on cast, it exiles a permanent. And as if that wasn't good enough, we can pay 2 and a colourless to sacrifice a land and return it from our graveyard to our hand. So even if our opponent does deal with this, we're perfectly fine sacrificing a land and taking out another one of their lands when we recast it. The last big boy we're going to talk about, and this one we really do want to hit off of a Great Aurora, is a 2 of Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. We know that we're going to be ramping a crap ton in the early part of the game, so we're probably going to get more permanents out of the Great Aurora than our opponent. Well, let's say our opponent gets 3, 4, 5 lands. If we cast Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, then straight away they lose 2 of those lands, meaning that not only was the Great Aurora much better for us than our opponent's got all of these cards in their hand and they can't even cast them anyway. And that's just on cast. We're ignoring the fact that when it resolves, we get a 10/10 with Indestructible, and when it attacks, it exiles 20 cards from the top of our opponent's library. Now we're going to move on to the utility package of this deck, because obviously we can't just play loads of ramp and loads of big boys, because we're going to get overrun in the early part of the game. First of all, we've got 3 Arboreal Glazers, which is just a 1 green mana, and it puts a land from our hand onto the battlefield. Now this is the one card that doesn't actually generate us card advantage, instead it's just there to ramp us into a 3-drop on turn 2. It also leaves behind a 0/3 body, which is going to be quite nice for blocking small creatures in the early part of the game. We're also running a 2 of Courser of Crufix, a 2/4 that we can play the top card of our library if it's a land, so it doesn't actually generate us card advantage unless there's a land on top of our library. However, the fact that it gains us life is going to help us buy the extra turn or 2 we need in the early to mid game, so that we don't get burnt out by the mono red decks. A 2 of Tireless Tracker helps us draw a whole bunch of cards later on in the game, also can be a win condition by itself, and usually our opponent's going to take some amount of time to get rid of the Tireless Tracker. The Tireless Tracker will also bring along clue tokens, which remember, we can either crack early on in the game to draw the cards, or with the Great Aurora on the battlefield, it draws us the cards anyway, because they are token permanents. And the last card in the deck is going to be a 2 of Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. It's a good utility planeswalker in the early part of the game, and in this deck, her +1 may as well not just be put a plant token onto the battlefield, it may as well be, in certain matchups, +1, draw a card. The reason being is that the Great Aurora counts permanents on the battlefield, which means we get an extra card to draw from the Great Aurora for every plant token on the battlefield. On the flip side, if we're playing against an aggressive deck like, say, Mono Red with their Monastery Swiftspears, we can go ahead and block the Monastery Swiftspear. If our opponent wants to use, say, a Wild Slash to get the plant token out of the way, that's perfectly fine. That means we've traded no cards for our opponent's 1 card, which means that's 1 less card for them to draw from with the Great Aurora later on in the game. Moving on to the sideboard, we have 3 Jaddy Offshoots, gains us a life whenever a land enters the battlefield, is also a 0/3 blocker, so good against the aggressive decks. A couple of natural states to deal with artifacts and enchantments we don't want to see. Some Veil of Summers to deal with counter spells from our opponent and Thoughtseize and stuff that disrupts our combo. 3 Scavenging Oozes, good for graveyard decks like Emerge or Rally of the Ancestors, but also pretty good against the decks playing things like Dig Through Time. If you can keep exiling cards from their graveyard, it makes delving that little bit harder. We have an Immortal Sun, helps us in the grindier matchups where our opponent's not killing us too quickly. We get to draw an extra card per turn. Our spells cost a little bit less, and it makes our opponent's Planeswalkers, as well as our own, not able to be activated, but chances are we might take out some of our Planeswalkers when we bring this in anyway. A 1-of Amulet of Safekeeping. If we're against an aggressive deck, it gives their creatures -1/-0, and also means if they want to target us with, say, a Burn Spell or a Thoughtseize, they have to pay an extra 1 mana. And finally, a 2-of Ugin the Spirit Dragon. We're going to be able to ramp quite nicely into 8 mana, and then it can be a board wipe for all permanents we don't want to see. And that is Mono Green, the Great Aurora. This deck is really fun to play, and I would highly recommend you guys at least watch the games and possibly even try building this one for a local F&M. Now, if you guys are just trying to get into Pioneer, but you're a little bit worried about the ban list, or maybe you don't want to splash out too much for this new format right now, well, if you just check down below in the description or hang around until the end of the video where I do my outro, I have a super budget version of this deck, which is slightly less consistent and slightly less powerful, but is nonetheless the same basic deck. Now, before we get to the gameplay right here, a big thank you to the people scrolling on screen right now. They would be donators on Patreon or Twitch subscribers who help provide the content here on this channel. If you would like to help support the channel and get access to exclusive video content like this, then consider supporting the channel via Patreon or becoming a Twitch subscriber. The links are in the description down below. Hi guys, it's Dan here for match 1. Now our opening hand here is a little bit slow. We are on the play. We don't have anything until turn 3 to play. When our opponent plays a Swamp and says go, now I'm feeling really good. Hoping for no Thoughtseize or Disruption early. For Fabled Passage, usually when you see a Fabled Passage, it usually means it's a slower deck, because most aggro decks don't want their lands coming out tapped early in the game. We get to go ahead and Nissa's Pilgrimage, get a couple of lands, and life's looking rather splendid. Our opponent is still rather slow here, and my god, Jurassic Park. Look at that top deck. Abriel Glazer, the little slothy guy, slapping a land onto the battlefield for an extra Tireless Tracker. Our opponent makes the pro play of, after Tireless Tracker has got 2 clue tokens, then they're going to Fatal Push. Oops. They then Teferi tick down on the Abriel Glazer. I probably wouldn't have even bothered putting that back to our hand because we could just ramp even further out of that. So, butter my ass, opponent. That was not a good move, young man. Young man, that was not a good move. So we managed to get a Nissa down, flip Nissa, and this just feels like such a good matchup for us, man. It's just like, Nissa's ticking up. We're already starting to outland. Is that even a word? Outland our opponent. Teferi's about to leave now. Oh no, Supreme Verdict. That's right. But I mean, look at the land production already, and we're about to cast. Like, we've got 2 more land ramping spells in our hand. Our Promise is going to come down. Now we get zombies on the field. Abriel Glazer comes down. We get another land onto the battlefield. So, oh no, man, this feels like such a rough matchup for them. Like a World Breaker's going to like bitch slap their ball bag and take out a land from underneath them, even if they have a counter spell. Stuff like Gaze Revenge, they can't counter or interact with outside of a board wipe, and they don't exactly have loads of creatures to block with, so Gaze Revenge is like the absolute beast wrecking their ass. I mean, look at this battlefield, like, we've got so many more lands than them. We're just getting more and more and more lands. Nissa's ticking up and just generating us card advantage. Nissa's Tribe goes and gets us a Desert of the Indomitable and the Blast Zone, as well as a basic forest. We may as well get utility lands at this point. I mean, a Dig Through Time is normally quite scary to see, but for us at the minute, it's like, go ahead, babes. Do your thing. Dig through your times. Another Teferi comes down, it takes out a zombie token, because why would you want to return a World Breaker to our hand? Oh, poor opponent. We top deck, of course, for a Crewfix, because we need the life gain right now. Hero's Downfall is pretty good against World Breaker, to be fair, but the other zombie token comes across. There's the G Revenge on top there. G Revenge on top, then an Ulamog. I mean, what does our opponent do about this? It's just it's just crazy. Like, they're just getting absolutely torn a new one. I mean, look at the lands. Look at the difference in lands. I didn't realize how bad it was during gameplay, but this is mental. Why is our opponent not conceding? I can still win! We can still win! We just need to counter that Ulamog. No! Double Gaze Revenge. Like, you need a board wipe right now. I decide to only attack with enough to win the game because of a potential Settle the Wreckage. But our opponent just concedes pretty soon. I'd love to cast the Great Aurora in this position just to see like how good it would go for us, but our opponent concedes. And we move on to sideboarding, where we don't really need to bring anything in. I'm so confident in this matchup that we just have it won. It just feels like an unwinnable matchup for them. Like they need to get a ton of Thoughtseize early to disrupt our hand, and then hope they can get Planeswalkers down to generate a lot of card advantage afterwards. It seems rough for them. It seems a little bit rough. It seems like we are the absolute players over the control strategy here. So we just take out one Great Aurora, and this is Renewal, and this is Tribe. We just bring in the 3 Veil of Summons, which we don't really need, to be honest. I don't think we even need them in this matchup, but we may as well. I mean, if it's going to like make the matchup a little bit easier than it already is. It's looking pretty good for us. Like, our opponent can't even like put any aggro on us early. Anyway, we have an opening hand here, which is a little bit risky. I'm surprised our opponent didn't take the Nissa's Triumph from us to cut off the turn 2 play. They took the Nissa Vastwood Seer instead, but we got a bit lucky. We top decked a land and then another land, and Nissa's got a Goss. Nissa's Triumph Goss, another couple of lands as well. We put down a Nissa Voice of Zendikar. Our opponent, Hero's Downfall's out, like whatever. I don't really care about Nissa Voice of Zendikar in this matchup. We don't need to block too much. Nissa's Pilgrimage comes down. We're ramping out again. We've got the Gaea's Revenge and a World Breaker in our hand. Our opponent goes for a Thoughtseize and they take the Hour of Promise. I assume this is to cut off the zombie tokens because they probably can't do anything on the field at the minute. They probably don't have a board wipe, I assume. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. Anyway, our opponent goes for a Dig Through Time on their end step, and this isn't turned out terribly for them. We are getting I don't want to say we're getting flooded. It's pretty unfair to say that when you're a 25 land deck that ramps, but we've got quite a few lands that we've drawn. We get to cast our World Breaker and take out a land. Our opponent Sphinx's Revelations in response, and we're hoping for nothing too bad here, and a Thoughtseize takes our Gaea's Revenge, so that gets our opponent right into the game. And a Nissa Vastwood Seer is nice, but that's pretty much all we have going on if you don't count the World Breaker on the field. And if our opponent gets rid of the World Breaker, then we're in a bit of trouble. We get in for 5 points of damage, our opponent settles the Wreckage. And I decide to go with Nissa Voice of Zendikar here, but I decide to not play a Nissa Vastwood Seer because I've already played my land. If my opponent has a removal spell, this Nissa is pretty much... I want this to land and I want it to be good. Our opponent luckily taps out. They put down a Nyx Fleece Ram, because the life gain's really important against us. If you can gain a life a turn, then you might buy the extra turn from Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger like we just drew. Nice one, opponent. Nice one. Cut the aggro out. Our opponent makes an ally token here. I don't really know why. You need to put pressure on Nissa, and making an ally token does not put pressure on Nissa at all. But eventually, we are going to draw the big hit. I mean, as we already drew it anyway, but let's assume we didn't have Ulamog in our hand. At some point, we're going to draw something pretty damn big. So Ulamog gets cast. We take out the creature land and the Gideon, and I mean, it's not looking good for our opponent, is it? They put down a Torrential Gearhulk, which gets a flashback Dig Through Time, which is good card advantage. Our opponent is now up to 4 cards in their hand, inclusive of Draw Step. But I think if I remember right, this is where I pull a Dan here and punt harder than an NFL footballer, because I should have Veiled of Summoned in response to a Teferi here, so they couldn't bounce Ulamog back to our hand. Although this is like, if this is the worst case scenario, our opponent's in a situation where they need to return an Ulamog to our hand. How bad is that situation for them? Anyway, we get to recast the Ulamog. I was expecting a counter spell here or something like that. But even if they do have a counter, we still get to take out the Teferi and the Gearhulk. They don't have a counter, and that's just game. Like, our opponent is so far behind. They're just not coming back from this. I mean, even if they have a board wipe, Ulamog's indestructible, so... yeah, GG's. Our opponent concedes.
Rolling around at the speed of sound. Got places to go, gotta follow my way.
Well, if we had a fortunate matchup in game 1, butter my ass was this one bad. I mulligan an opening hand that doesn't really do much. We had the Great Aurora, but not the best ramp ever, and also, we didn't really have anything to do in the early game. So our opponent is on a Boros aggro deck. We're a deck that is a bit slow and takes time to ramp. We have the This Is Renewal in hand, which is probably going to keep us in the game, so we just go ahead and block. I'm expecting, something like a Defiant Strike here, or something to grow their guy. But I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm just going to get Arboreal Glazer to prevent some amount of damage, then fine. Opponent has a Reckless Rage, so it's like... so they get to grow their own guy whilst removing Tireless Tracker, and we get a Clue token, but... I mean, we don't have time to crack that Clue token. So it looks like our opponent is on a kind of Boros Heroic deck, and we're down to 12 life already. I have to go for this is Pilgrimage here, because we don't have 6 mana for Nissa's Renewal, and yeah, things are not looking great. Things are looking pretty damn bad. Titan Strength from our opponent and a Boros Charm, and we're dead. Butter my ass, man. Jesus Christ, we got absolutely fudged in the cracker. Sideboarding wise, we're bringing some Jaddy offshoots for a bit of life gain. We take out some World Breakers and some Great Auroras. Bring in a couple of Gideons, because if Gideon could get onto the battlefield, we probably win unless our life total's really low. So Gideon is something good to ramp into. Anyway, game 2, we take a massive risk. We only have 2 lands in our hand, but we get to ramp really quickly. If we draw the 3rd land, which we do, we have the option of Nissa's Pilgrimage or Nissa Voice of Zendikar. I go for the Voice of Zendikar because that means we can block the Swift Spear. And, you know, maybe we can get through this. Our opponent has a Boros Charm for Nissa, but Nissa, that's fine. That's a card out of their hand. They've dealt no damage this turn. We're still on 20. We get to go ahead and Nissa's Pilgrimage here, and we're setting up for this Ugin. And we're actually looking pretty damn good here. You know, our opponent they're going to attack, and we will take, you know, 1 point of damage. Even if they have a pump spell here, say we take 5 damage for the Monastery Swift Spear, well, haha, opponent, we are not overly bothered, my friend. We can still win this. We have a chance. Now, we're going to get the Hour of Promise this turn. Unfortunately, we're not going to get 2 zombies because we don't have a desert out already. I just decided to go ahead and get, like, 2 deserts, like, whatever. Maybe we draw another Hour of Promise off the top, but then we're quite happy being able to just get some zombies for our turn next turn. We don't have to slam the Ugin. But for now, the Ugin is coming down next turn, and our opponent's got to deal 18 points of damage through a blocker here. So, yeah, the Glazer, the Sloth Boy, buying us the life we need. A Wild Slash from our opponent. We're only down to 14, and an Ugin only has to tick down for 2 as well. And if our opponent's going to put damage into Ugin, we've got a Courser of Crucifix coming up. We've got a Tireless Tracker. We're going to get time to rebuild straight afterwards, and our opponent's going to have not much going on. So, Eugene is going to swallow a Cow Charm here. Now, our opponent follows it with Whisper as well. So, Ugin has swallowed 5 damage and wiped the board and bought us a huge amount of tempo play here. Now, we draw a Gaze Revenge, but I decided to just play the cheaper spells here. See if we can get some card advantage going on. You know, gain a life from Courser of Crucifix. A Wild Slash from our opponent, don't really care. We would like to keep the tracker around ideally to draw cards, but, I mean, that's still 2 damage not going to our face. We're on 15 points of life. We have the biggest creature on the field. We've got a Gaze Revenge in our hand. Put the Blast Zone on 2. We're not really worried about the Swift Spear. We're more worried about the things that have Heroic a bit later on. We go for the Gaze Revenge now. We just draw on Nissa's Pilgrimage. And that is going to be a very quick clock on our opponent. I don't know how they deal with this. An 8-5 that they can never target. I guess they can block him, but if they're blocking, they're not dealing damage to us. They have nothing. We're going to game 3. We're in the great games. The Great Aurora, or Eugene's Aurora this time. Absolutely wrecking our opponent. We made some adjustments in the sideboard there, but I don't know what it was. I kept this hand based on Jaddy Offshoot, and yeah, not my best idea ever. Not my best idea ever. I decided that I'm going to play the Jaddy Offshoot here in the hope my opponent doesn't have removal, which is probably asking a lot, let's be honest. We drew the Nissa's Triumph, so I'm hoping it goes well. Looks like they might not have removal because they Defiant Strike. We go down to 16. We gain a life back with Jaddy Offshoot. We have a Nissa's Triumph. So hopefully we can just keep hitting our life gain stuff. But a Feather the Redeem, so now whenever they target one of their own creatures with a spell, it goes back to their hand on end step. So, I don't think our 1 life per turn is going to do much in the face of this. A Cow Charm gives the Feathered double strikes. That's 6 damage a turn guaranteed. I mean, I decided to block here because we're in such shit shape anyway. God's Willing, so our Jaddy Offshoot's gone, and so I think this Hyper Aggro is the definite answer to our deck, and we probably need to have more in the sideboard to deal with it. Good game, opponent. We got wrecked. So after the absolute ass-pounding of match 2, we're back here for match 3, and this hand is actually pretty damn good. You know, we've got the Nissa's Triumph as a 2-drop into a couple of decent 3-drops. If we get behind on board early, then it's not all bad. Our opponent uses a Jizz Hands to take away our Nissa's Triumph, to take away our 2-drop, but we've still got our Courser of Crucifixes in hand, so it's not all bad. Instead, our opponent casts Jizz Hands 2.0, and they take a Courser of Crucifix, which is a little bit annoying, but we can live with that. I'd rather take Courser than our Great Aurora we just drew. Gas Central, and, you know, life's looking pretty good for us. Our opponent casts an Embodiment of Agonies, which gets Flying, Death Touch, and a +1/+1 counter for each mana cost card in their graveyard. We play a Tireless Tracker. Our opponent uses a Grasp of Darkness on that straight away, so we can't get further clue tokens. We're not going to block for now. We're gaining a little bit of life with Corsair. 4 damage a turn is not backbreaking. Our opponent casts a Gurmag Angler, and man, this Great Aurora is looking even better by the minute. And because we have a Desert Owl, the Hour of Promise gets us 2 zombie tokens. We gain a whole bunch of life. We're still up to 19. And sure, the big fish is going to be a bit of a problem, but I mean, we can just throw a token in front of that, I guess, for a while. As soon as this Great Aurora comes down, our opponent's got 1 card in hand, and they've got a few cards on the field, but I mean, it's looking better for us. And when our opponent doesn't attack with the big fish, that is the perfect situation for us. We get in with the Gaze Revenge, and I'm more than happy to trade here. And I'm sure my opponent is as well, but I know that's 1 less permanent you have, and we're going to draw way more cards than you, so I'm quite happy trading permanents right now. Arboreal Glazer comes down, which means we can ramp out another land. And then we see the Nissa's Renewal on top of our library, so I think, you know what, we could go Great Aurora here, but fuck it, I'm going to crack a clue token, get even more lands. So as long as our opponent doesn't have Thoughtseize or Inquisition here, then we're going to get to cast Great Aurora next turn, and we're going to have way more cards than them. Like, we're going to draw like 20, and they're going to draw like 7. And when we see a second Great Aurora on top of our library, it means that now even a Thoughtseize won't stop it. We get a bit fortunate that way. I'm probably playing my food a bit too much here, but I'm just having so much fun. The Great Aurora is the best card ever printed. It's such a tilt factor. Anyway, we float all of our mana here, and I'm hoping this doesn't go too badly. It shouldn't go too badly. That's until we get 5 lands out of 18 cards. 5 lands. Our opponent hits 3 out of 8, so at this point I'm thinking, well, I need to get stuff on the field that does stuff. I can't just ramp here, because I'm going to have to discard a whole bunch of cards if I do that. So I just decided to put down both Nissas. I can't remember what else I do after that, actually. So make a plant token. We're just trying to re-establish the board here. Yeah, we're going to get the Nissa Vassal Seer. We get another land down, so then we can go for a Nissa's Pilgrimage. Meaning we can put another land onto the field, flip the Nissa over, tick up to go and get Nissa's Pilgrimage. We're going to have to go discard a whole bunch of cards on end step, unfortunately, but, I mean, it's probably still okay. Our opponent, we're way ahead of our opponent still. I mean, look at the situation. It couldn't have gone much worse for us with the Great Aurora, and we've still got, look at that amount of lands, and 2 Planeswalkers flipped. We've still got 2 Great Auroras in our hand. We've got the Gaea's Revenge, we've got the Tireless Tracker generating this card advantage, so I don't think we're looking that bad. A second big fish from our opponent, and yeah, at this point, it's just a matter of trying to set up for the next Great Aurora. Generate as many permanents as we possibly can. Clue tokens, plant tokens, and then the next Great Aurora, like, our opponent's going to get maybe 10 cards to our probably 25 at this point. We are going to have to block, though. We want to keep our Nissa alive, so we're going to go ahead and just block the plant token here. We're generating it's just a lot of tokens against our opponent. Unfortunately, they did take out the Tireless Tracker with a cast down, but even that's not the end of the world, you know? I mean, we're trading cards, and I mean, that's perfectly fine for us, you know? They're going to run out of those kind of removal spells eventually. Now, our opponent slaps the big fish across us again. We just chuck a plant in. Plants vs. Zombies, do you get it? It's a funny joke. It's a funny joke because of the game. And Obnixilis reignited from our opponent. Now, that draws them cards, and if they draw cards, it means they get more cards off the Great Aurora. So, fudge that. That ain't happening. No way, Jose. Our goal here is to get down as many permanents or draw as many cards as we possibly can, then Great Aurora. So, we see the Arboreal Glazer on top of a library. We put it down, play our land for the turn, put an extra land into play, float a whole bunch of mana, make a plant token. Great Aurora. We draw, I think, 28 cards to our opponent's 11. You can see there's a slight disparity here in the amount of lands we both got. We got so much mana here that we get to cast a Nissa and then an Ulamog, so we even get to use all of our mana here. Our opponent's going to have 6 cards in hand at the end of this, but not much use when you've only got 3, maybe 4 lands. There's not much use when you're facing down a 10-10 with Indestructible and you're in mono black, and the 10-10's got more umbilical cords than maternity units. Anyway, on to sideboarding. Enough of the crappy puns there. We're going to bring in some Scavenging Users, some Veil of Summers, take out the Gaea's Revenges, some World Breakers, some of the top end. They have got Death Touch stuff, so Gaea's Revenge isn't quite as good. We're going to bring in some Ugins instead to wipe that board, and hopefully take over the game. Now, our opening hand here is actually got the Ugin in it, so I'm quite happy. Not the best ramp ever, but good early game creatures. We're hitting our land drop, so I know we're going to get time against our opponent's deck, so I'm quite happy with this hand. A couple of Stitches Suppliers early for them, which is going to help them get good things in their graveyard. And a Thoughtseize, a bloody electrical shit jizz hands. And our opponent's going to take our bloody Spirit Dragon. We want that guy. He's our friend. He's our Ugin friend. He's our super friend, if you will. We draw a Tireless Tracker off the top, and Scooz is not a bad turn 2 play, let's be honest. A Trespasser's Curse, like, what? What? I guess they were worried about the amount of plant tokens we were making, so we can't make as many plant tokens, but sure, okay. Of all 2-drops I could have seen there, I'm quite happy with that one. In the meantime, our Scooz is swallowing their graveyard whole like some kind of porn star ooze thing. The course comes down, generates us a life from a land drop, but we lose a life because the deadly Trespasser's Curse. We're just like really taking over this game. The Scooz is getting bigger and bigger, and our opponent just concedes the game. And we are currently 2-1. Now on to match 4, and I was actually thinking about just re-recording this one and doing a different match because our opponent's deck is a bit whack and out there, and it's not very good if I'm being honest. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it really works. It's a bit clunky, their combo they're trying to achieve, which you'll see later on. They do take a game off us, I think. But anyway, our opening hand is a little bit slow. I did take a risk on the Nissa's Triumph staying in our hand, which I probably should have done after last round with the amount of jizz hands ripping our hand to bits. But our opponent's playing a whole bunch of small artifacts. I was expecting to like an Emery deck, but they're like currently black-white, so there's no blue here, and I know what's going on. And then a Revenge of Ravens, so whenever a creature attacks them, we lose a life and they gain a life. In the meantime, we're just going Hour of Promise, and there's a Doom Foretold. So this took me a long... I had to look at this a lot, but at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-token, non-land permanent. If they can't, they discard a card, they make a Knight token, and they draw a card. So quite happy that we don't have to sacrifice any permanents. We'll quite happily get rid of a land at this point. We find ourselves in our Promise. We've got loads of zombie tokens, and looks like we're looking pretty good here at this point. So our opponent's combo is to Doom Foretold with a Starfield of Nyx, just keep bringing that back every turn. So we have to keep sacrificing permanents or discarding cards. It's obviously quite a janky combo, and it's quite clunky. Our opponent's got a Prison Realm to exile our Nissa, which is like, whatever. You know, a Great Aurora means we'll get the Nissa back after that resolves anyway. In the meantime, we should go for a Nissa's Renewal. We get to just generate more and more and more cards on our opponents. And they finally play a blue source of mana, so I'm a little bit worried here. They play an Ethereal Absolution, which gives their creatures +1/+1, ours -1/-1. I decide on end step that we're probably going to have to Great Aurora soon, and I want my opponent to lose as many cards on their side of the board as possible. They've been playing out a lot of 2-drops, so we're going to try and Blast Zone on 2 to get rid of as many of their 2-drops as we can, and there's even more 2-drops down now. So we're going to get 4 for 1 here with a Blast Zone to make our Great Aurora a little bit better. At the minute, our opponent was probably going to draw as many permanents as we would, so not quite as many now, but, you know, it's still pretty good for them. We float all the manas, and we cast the Great Aurora. Our opponent gets 15 cards to our 22. The land, you get a few more lands than they do. We get a few more lands than they do. A Gaia's Revenge, 2 Gaia's Revenges come down, puts our opponents down to 6. And it's looking pretty bad for them. There's no way they're dealing with this Gaia's Revenge. They're not going to have board wipes by the look of it in their deck. And even if they do have a board wipe, we've got a 3rd Gaia's Revenge in our hand. So the combo of the Great Aurora is finally paying off for the Gaia's Revenge. And our opponent concedes. We'll go on to sideboarding. I can't actually remember what I bring in with sideboarding. I know I bring in the Natural States. I think it was a mistake for me here to not bring in the Veil of Summers. My opponent did play a Thoughtseize that game. So I don't know if I do or not, but we take out just a few mid-rangey stuff that isn't that relevant. I mean, gaining a whole bunch of life with Nissa's Renewal isn't really that relevant. Now, opening hand here, I'm really contemplating keeping. I think I do keep it. I do keep it. Our opponent has a Duress for the Great Aurora early, but like we're hitting our land drops early, and our opponent's deck wasn't that aggressive. So whilst this hand is not great, it's not amazing, we have the better late game in my opinion, and you know, we've got 2 payoffs in our hand, so there's a high chance we're going to draw lands, or we're going to draw, like, ramp spells, so I'm reasonably happy that our opponent is not going to disrupt us too much. How wrong was I? Because now they're duressing the good stuff out of our deck, and there's a Doom Foretold, we're going to have to start discarding a card. Our opponent's going to draw a card and make a whole bunch of good stuff. Put a counter on the Blast Zone, we're going to go for the old wipe your board of 2-drops again. We let a land go. And a Starfield Nyx from our opponent. So you can see the combo here is they're going to start bringing the Doom Foretold back. So then we have to keep sacrificing a permanent at the very least, or discarding a card every turn. So it is a bit of a janky combo. And we'll cut a long story short here. Our opponent does win this game. We kind of get a bit cramped on mana. We do use the World Breaker here to take out the Starfield of Nyx. Our opponent draws a whole bunch of cards in response. So we get rid of the Starfield of Nyx to get rid of that combo. Unfortunately, our opponent uses a Dance of the Manse, or something like that. I can't remember the name of the bloody card. It's called Dance of the Manse. There we go, to bring back the Doom Foretold. So we're going to have to sacrifice our World Breaker, but that's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the World Breaker. It's a funny joke. I'm a funny man. We top deck the Nissa's Renewal, so we're probably back in this game. The Doom Foretold is going to make us discard a card next turn, so we're going to get rid of the Hour of Promise. And then we can probably cast the Ulamog. That's the plan, at least. However, the issue is our opponent has so many ways of making us sacrifice Ulamog or exiling Ulamog. And that's just confirmed when they play a Prison Realm. 3-drop enchantment to deal with the Captain Umbilical Cords. And yeah, our opponent, like, we're down to 11 life at the end of this turn. Sorry, 5 life at the end of this turn. We top deck the Natural State, which gets us back the Ulamog, so maybe we have a chance. But even then, we're probably going up to like 1 life this turn at best. A Starfield of Nyx for our opponents, they can just keep getting stuff back as well anyway. So our top deck needs to be good, and we need to get very, very, very lucky for the rest of this game. A second Prison Realm to take away the Ulamog again. It's like our opponent doesn't like the Squid Arms. We bring back the World Breaker from our graveyard, so we can go ahead and then take out the Prison Realm again, so we have blockers again. But now our opponent has so many outs. And if he gave me 1,000 guesses, opposite that Ghost Council would not have been my guess there. Anyway, with sideboarding 2.0, we take out some Great Auroras and some Gaze Revenges and Nissa's Triumphs. And instead we're going to bring in some Scavenging Oozes in the 2-drop area, as well as some of the Veil of Summers, to disrupt their graveyard a little bit. The Starfield of Nyx isn't going to be much use when they don't have any enchantments in their graveyard. Now our opening hand here, again, has the Ulamog in here, and this was a bit more ramp friendly. We have the Nissa Voiced Vastwood Seer in here, so we're going to be able to ramp early. We have the Nissa's Pilgrimage, so we're just hoping to avoid the dreaded Jizz Hands, the Thoughtseize. Anyway, it's looking a lot better than last game. We get in with the Nissa Vastwood Seer, and we play a Courser of Crufix. We see a Ugin on top of our library, so we've definitely got the late game sorted here. Unfortunately, a Doom Foretold from our opponent, and they make some weird plays here. We sacrifice the Courser of Crufix. I was hoping to maybe flip Nissa here, but that doesn't really work, so we'll just go ahead and just ramp out as best we can. We're going to have to sacrifice the Nissa next turn. It happens. But randomly, our opponent decides that they're going to instead get the Nissa off the field with a Prison Realm, even though we'd have to sacrifice the Nissa next turn. So I think that was terrible play from our opponent. We do still have to discard a card, I guess, so it's probably not all bad for our opponent, but we just go ahead and cast a World Breaker, and we get back the Nissa anyway, and then a Duress takes away our Ugin, which is a bit annoying, but overall not the worst thing ever. Revenge of Ravens is like, who cares? Certainly doesn't bother me. We play a land, we flip the Nissa, we start accumulating card advantage, and this is where I think we just take over the game. You know, our opponent, we've not stumbled like we did in game 2. We've been able to find the right amount of interaction when we needed to. We've managed to ramp quite nicely. We found some of the big payoffs. And our opponent saw our hand last turn with the Duress, so they know the Ulamog's coming, and they just concede the game. Currently a 3-1. I'd like to finish with a 4-1 ideally, especially since that last round was a bit of a janky deck from our opponent. So our opponent goes with a turn 1 Overgrown Tomb into a Stitch of Supply. I kept a risky opening hand here. We do need to hit a land drop off the top. Not a land drop, but Nissa's Triumph is probably just as good. If we hit a land, we could also go Nissa's Pilgrimage's turn to then really set up for a very fast Gaze Revenge. But we get to put both cards from the Nissa's Triumph onto the battlefield because the second Arboreal Glaze are in our hands. That was pretty good for us. We go for an Hour of Promise. We don't get to put zombies onto the battlefield, but you know what? I'm probably okay just getting a zombie. A desert. Maybe setting it for a later Hour of Promise and a Blast Zone for now. Looks like our opponent's on Aristocrats or Rally the Ancestors. That's usually the only deck that plays Zulaport Cutthroats. We cast Zenith's Pilgrimage to get a whole bunch more lands, and look at the difference in lands right here. This is turn 4. Our opponent's got 4 lands, we have 9, and we've got more lands in our hand. This deck just rams is mental. This is where the Arboreal Glazes are really good as well, because we don't really want to kill that Stitch of Supply. I mean, I guess we'd probably be okay killing the Zulaport Cutthroats, but the fact that we're just able to block and just take not take those little chip points of damage in the early game is so good. We play the Tireless Tracker, we're able to get a Clue token. We crack the Clue just in case there's anything we can play here. Our opponent, as expected, goes Coco on end step, but they find 2 2-drops. Notice the Blast Zone. You're going to get blasted, bitches. Blasted, bitches. That's going to be a lot of life loss, though. Our opponent casts another Zulaport Cutthroat, and with that on the stack, I decide to go ahead and crack the Blast Zone, because I think that would kill us if I do it afterwards. So I just go ahead and crack this all now. Look at how much damage we're taking. And it'd probably be a hell of a lot more than that if that like, second Zealot Cutthroat resolved. It'd probably be approaching lethal, if not lethal. So we have to crack that before that hits the battlefield, otherwise we will get drained out of the game. We top deck the Ulamog, which is probably well timed. We were due to draw something good anyway, but the fact that we get to take out their white sources of mana, they still have one left, so a Rally of the Ancestors is still possible from our opponents. But the good news is that they need to have a hell of a hand, or a hell of a bit of fortune for this to work out for them. They play a Cartel Aristocrat. They would have to have white source into a Rally of the Ancestors. We get a clue token. I go ahead and attack with Ulamog here. The plan being that I want to Field of Ruin that white source of mana to then stop a potential Rally of the Ancestors. So I'm going to attack first because we might exile all of the white sources from their library. We take out the white source. They only have a swamp, so this game's looking pretty over for them now. I don't see how they win from this position. If Ulamog gets to attack next turn, my opponent has literally no cards in the library, and they have nothing. So we bring in a couple of Ugins and some Jaddy Offshoots to gain some life in the early game. Jaddy Offshoot is not going to be that amazing in this game. If we can just get some points of life, though, it means that we might survive long enough so that you know, the chip points of damage, the odd little bit of drain won't kill us. But if our opponent gets the combo together, then the Rally of the Ancestors combo with a hell of a graveyard, then we're in trouble. I keep an extremely risky opening hand. We have the Scavenging Ooze and Ramp in it, so I'm really reluctant to put this hand back. I think we're all in on Scavenging Ooze in this matchup. I think we got pretty lucky last game. We don't draw a land. We don't draw a land. And we go ahead and we concede the match after the next turn because we just don't draw a land. And you know what? I probably could have played it out, but we're probably not winning from that position. I realised I actually took 2 lands after sideboarding, so I put one of the lands back in and then took a Worldbreaker out. We will get an opening hand that doesn't really have much going on. We keep, again, a hand here on 6, which has potential but isn't really what we're looking for, but I don't think I want to go down to 5. We draw a Nissa's Renewal off the top, which is not great. The Abriel Glazer will come down, we'll get an extra life with the Jaddy Offshoots. And we top deck the Scavenging Ooze, and this is the key part of the game, and we're actually going to pause here for a second. Now, as you'll see for the next few turns, we're having to use Scavenging Ooze as our literal lifeline here. We can cast spells, but we have to just be really patient, use Scavenging Ooze to stop our opponent winning the game and just exiling key cards from their graveyard. So if we resume play here back on our opponent's turn, they've played their Sata Wayfinder, put a few things in their graveyard, and now, what are they doing? It is a Catacomb Sifter, so it's not looking great for us so far. It's not the worst thing we could have seen. Luckily, we find a Nissa's Triumph off the top and decide, you know what? We're going to get to exile 1 card from their graveyard here. I want to take this turn off so I can hit my land drops for the next couple of turns, and I want to be able to make sure I can just hit their graveyard with as much mana as I possibly can. Our hand is quite high CMC right now, so we need to have those lands coming down for the next few turns. It feels like if the Scavenging Ooze leaves the field, though, for any reason, we're probably dead. I can't imagine our opponent doesn't have good cards in their hand. So the good news for us, though, is that we get to pick and choose with the Scavenging Ooze which cards we take from their graveyard. Now, our opponent does use their Rally of the Ancestors here. This is just a value Rally of the Ancestors, though. They only do it for 2, I believe. And because they don't have a Sacrifice outlet or a Drain outlet, there's no worries. It's just drawing them a whole bunch of cards. We're going to get to untap with Scavenging Ooze, and now we should be in control. I think here I should have used Nissa's Pilgrimage for this 1 turn. We could have lost, I know, but it feels like this is probably a punt by me. My opponent has to exile all of those creatures. I guess you can make an argument that there's no downside to doing this. A Sin Collector from our opponent. They take the Nissa's Pilgrimage, and now I feel really bad about not casting that. The good news is, though, that there's still no Sacrifice outlet on the field. There's no Drain outlet on the field for our opponent, so we get to now use all of our mana, pump it all into Scavenging Ooze, take all of those creatures out of their graveyard. Our opponent's got to start again. When we top deck the Ugin, now it feels even worse that I didn't use this as Pilgrimage last turn. A Sin Collector from our opponent, and then the Cartel Aristocrats. So now they have the Sacrifice outlet, but they just need the Drain outlet, but we still have Scavenging Ooze, so it's not all bad. As long as there's not multiple Drain outlets on the field, and remember, we're gaining a whole bunch of life here. We top deck and this is Pilgrimage. I do use it this time. I want to make sure that I'll still have 2 lands available, so we can exile 2 key cards from their graveyard this turn. Our opponent doesn't have anything going on this turn, so now we're looking really, really, really good. We go with our Promise here. My opponent did nothing last turn, so it's a sign of weakness. So now we get to still have 2 mana up here for the Scavenging Ooze, and if my opponent has the Rally of the Ancestors, it's probably still not the end of the world. Even one Zilliport Cutthroat is okay. We're on 31 life. If we untap here, it feels like we're really, really far ahead. I do decide to go with the Nissa's Renewal because we would gain so much life. We gain like 10 life it, and we would still have green mana available. I think the one mistake here I made, though, is I probably shouldn't have left Blast Zone up. I think it's more important to have the green mana here rather than put a counter on Blast Zone or have the ability to even crack Blast Zone, which we didn't have. So I think that was my mistake here. My opponent starts to drain us by sacrificing their board, so there's obviously a Wrath of the Ancestors coming. But we have to make sure we exile the key cards from their graveyard. So any drain outlet, any sacrifice outlet has to go straight away. To be honest, Wrath of the Ancestors, if you don't have a drain outlet or a sacrifice outlet on the field, it's just not a very good card. It's pretty shit. So Scavenging Ooze is just keeping us the old bollock card. Scavenging Ooze looks like a couple of bollocks. He's keeping us in the game by the look of it. And you notice here my opponent's library is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they're in danger of actually milling themselves out here because you've got Sata Wayfinders, Stitcher Suppliers, you're drawing cards with Elvish Visionary, so then they're in trouble. Now it take a long time to think about what I'm going to exile here, and I end up taking the Catacomb Sifter, and I believe it's the Catacomb Sifter, and I take a Sata Wayfinder because my opponent scryed a card on top of their library, so I want to make sure that they can't draw that card with the Sata Wayfinder. They can scry as much as they like, they can drain us as much as they like, but there is no way I'm letting them draw that card because it's obviously a good card they put on top of their library. They're going to stack it in such a way that these they will draw the card first. So our opponent gets all of these things back, and they have the Sacrifice Outlet, plus they have one Drain Effect. But the Drain Effect, like when we're on 37 life, one Zilliport Cutthroat drain us for 1 life per creature sacrificed. It's not really a big deal, to be honest. We can certainly live through that. Our opponent gets in for some damage, giving it pro black and pro green. We top deck a Nissa's Triumph. I can't remember if I decide to go ahead and cast this or not. I think I do decide that it is worth it because we end up with... We're net down 1 forest, but we get more forests overall. And with how much mana we have available to us, I think it's perfectly reasonable to do this. Probably just down to 6 cards in their library though, so it's not looking very good for them at all. The Rally of the Ancestors, they have to sacrifice all of their, or exile all of their board on upkeep. They sacrifice these Stitcher Supplies in response, and I don't think they realise that they've got virtually no cards left in their library, so they're about to mill themselves out. The one thing they can do is they can cast a second Rally of the Ancestors on their own upkeep before they draw a card, and they get to maybe drain us out of the game, but look how many forests we have untapped. If they do cast a Rally of the Ancestors, we get rid of anything that drains us for life, and when we win, there's nothing they can do. Our opponent doesn't even do that. They have 2 cards in their hand, they go to the draw step, we win, GG. Now, in reviewing the Great Aurora, first of all, this deck against any control deck is freaking insane. The Gaia's Revenge is something that most control decks just cannot deal with because A, they don't have many creatures out, and B, their targeted removal, their counter spells don't do anything. On top of that, the Ulamogs exiling 2 permanents on cast, the World Breaker, a recursive thing from our graveyard that can take out one of their lands, an enchantment, is really, really hard for a control deck to deal with consistently. However, we did have a bit of trouble with the Boros aggro deck, though I will say I did play another match off camera against Mono Reds, and though it was still a very close game and we had to draw very, very well, we did take down that game, although, again, I think we got pretty lucky, and our opponent, I think, mulliganed to 5 in one of those games. So, a very rough matchup is the aggro, and we do maybe need to sideboard a bit more towards the aggressive decks. One thing that was very fortunate for us is that we didn't come up against many combo decks, so like an Aetherworks Marvel, the Saheeli Rai combo, where we probably would struggle a bit more, and I didn't actually put sufficient cards into the sideboard to deal with that. There was no Pithing Needles, there was no Grafdigger's Cages, there was no Sorcerer's Spyglass, kind of stuff that deals with those combo decks. So it's also something we need to take into account that, yeah, we probably would have had a game against those decks, but I didn't have anything in my sideboard to deal with them. Now, I would highly recommend anybody who's looking to build a budget Pioneer deck that is fun, not super serious, should definitely try this deck. Now, the Ulamogs and the Tireless Trackers and some of the lands can be a bit more expensive, but you could easily build a budget version of this deck for probably less than $20. Gaia's Revenges are probably $2 a playset. You could just put 25 basic forests in there. The ramp spells, you're probably spending less than $5 total on all of them. And because you retain the Gaia's Revenges, you still have the main crux of the deck after the Great Aurora. You still have those Gaia's Revenges to attack your opponent with haste, and there's nothing they can do about it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed Mono Green, the Great Aurora, and I will see you guys next time for another bit of something different. My name was Dan, this was Pioneer, the Great Aurora, and you were most certainly welcome. It was also MTG Tavern, I probably should have mentioned that as well. Boom, what up guys, it's me back again. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Something Different. Remember to go over this way and look at some other videos over there. There's a subscribe button over there. I barely can say subscribe. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time. Much love, y'all.